Have you heard of people who remember past lives under hypnosis? Are these testimonies reliable? In the previous 2 episodes, we saw that one of the serious issues with reincarnation is the fact that we do not remember anything from alleged past lives. Nothing that could make us mend our life and stop the vicious cycle generated by karma. In this episode, we assess the evidence that suggests the contrary, that there actually exist cases of people who remember past lives under hypnosis. They seem to provide historical facts about past lives, and these facts can be researched to a certain degree. I'm Dr. Ernest Valea, and in this episode we analyze this modern evidence for reincarnation. And by the way, please excuse my Omicron-tainted voice. We start with the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. The content of this episode is part of Chapter 5 in this book, Artificial Intelligence, Reincarnation and Resurrection. Hypnosis is defined by the American Psychological Association as, I quote, a therapeutic technique in which clinicians make suggestions to individuals who have undergone a procedure designed to relax them and focus their minds. As a therapy, called hypnotherapy, it is used to treat mental disorders that originate in the subconscious mind by identifying the painful events that caused them in the past and by transmitting suggestions meant to heal these wounds of the past. As such, it is used for helping patients to deal with post-traumatic stress, overcome addiction to smoking, drugs, gambling, or alcohol, or to treat sleep disorders, anxiety, and depression. Since we are entering a specialized domain of psychology, some clarifications are needed here regarding the meaning of the terms conscious, unconscious, and subconscious. The conscious is the part of our mind that analyzes, compares, desires, and acts on the basis of objective data apprehended by natural means. Besides things we are aware of that determine the way we think and act, there are hidden motivations, desires, and fears buried deep down in our mind that produce thoughts and behavior that we cannot justify in a rational way. For example, we might categorically refuse a particular dish without realizing why. The real reason may be that we had a severe food poisoning in childhood caused by that food. Although we have forgotten that episode, it has remained fixed in our mind and it causes us an inexplicable reaction in the present. The part of our memory where such episodes are stored is called the subconscious mind and is the seat of mental activity of which we are not conscious. The unconscious refers to the state when consciousness is absent as a result of an accident or general anesthesia or in deep sleep. Only in psychoanalysis does it have another meaning, but this is not important for our topic in this episode. So I will use only the first 2 terms, conscious and subconscious, the second referring to the mental domain accessed through hypnosis. Hypnosis became widely known as a method of investigating past lives in 1952, when Maury Bernstein, an American hypnotist, practiced his skills on Virginia Tighe, a family friend. During the hypnosis session, Bernstein came up with the idea of asking Virginia to go back in time beyond the date of her birth and describe what she saw and where she was. To everyone's surprise, she suddenly started speaking with a strong Irish accent, claiming that her name was Bridie Murphy. She was born in 1798 and lived near Cork in Ireland. Among the details she provided about her past life were the names of her parents, the name of her school, the church and the date she was married, how she died at the age of 66, and where she was buried. Her descriptions seemed to match life in 19th century Ireland, and the dramatic way she spoke under hypnosis gave credibility to the whole story. After listening to the recordings made under hypnosis, Virginia and her husband accepted the doctrine of reincarnation themselves. It was considered at that time that a scientific proof of reincarnation was finally found. A few years later, the data produced by Virginia under hypnosis was checked by reporters of the Chicago Daily News. They went to Ireland but could not confirm her story. Neither her name nor that of her husband, who allegedly was a lawyer, were found in any civil registry. The suburb in which she claimed to have lived did indeed exist, but no other facts could be confirmed. The church in which she said she was married did not exist, nor its address, nor the priest who married her. Another search was launched by the Chicago American newspaper, which produced even more devastating data for the credibility of the whole story. Although Virginia denied any connection with Ireland or to have had any contacts among Irish immigrants, in childhood she lived across the street from a lady newly arrived from Ireland named Bridie Murphy Corkel. Virginia frequently visited this lady and also had an Irish aunt who often told her about life in Ireland. A former high school teacher recalled that Virginia was good at literature. At one time she learned a monologue who contained data similar to the story of Bridie Murphy and reproduced this story with a strong Irish accent. All this information destroyed the credibility of Virginia's past life, indicating that the source of all data produced under hypnosis was her subconscious mind. Bridie Murphy really existed, but she didn't live in Ireland a century before, but only across the street in Virginia's childhood. Another famous case is that of Dolores Jay in 1970. Her husband, Carol, a Methodist pastor, hypnotized her to heal her of back pain. Suddenly, she started answering questions with Nein und Ja, which in German means no and yes. In following sessions, assisted by German speakers, the pastor found out that his wife was speaking in German of a past life in which she was Gretchen Gottlieb, the daughter of a Catholic mayor in Eberswalde, in Germany. Gretchen said she did not know how to read and write and was suffering from the persecution against Catholics. This indicated a time of persecution during the Bismarck government in the 1870s. She could not remember anything past the age of 16, when it appears she was killed by a mob while trying to flee the city. In checking the youth of Dolores, no source was found from which she could have learned German. Therefore, it was suggested that she was speaking of her experience of a past life. Closer investigation of this case, however, proved that it also lacked a spectacular explanation. The quality of her German was very poor, and most of the answers were given in one word or in very short sentences. Out of the 237 words of her German vocabulary, half of them were similar to English, and the pronunciation was far from that of a native German. Further research revealed that there was no mayor of Eberswalde with that name, and her descriptions of that town were not accurate. Since anyone can pick up a few words in German, and since the family in which she grew up was of German origin, this case too lost its original excitement. Despite the issues presented by such cases, hypnotic regression became very popular for discovering past lives. Countless hypnotists made a career out of this new business. The psychological states displayed by the subjects of hypnosis are dramatic. They see themselves in a different body, speak in a different voice, display unnatural facial expressions, and manifest unknown talents. In some cases, real wounds appear on the body according to the scenario they recount. All the information about the alleged past life is obtained through a dialogue initiated by the hypnotist, in which the client is asked to go back in time beyond the date of birth and describe what he or she sees. Given the requirement that clients fully comply with the hypnotist's suggestions, we find a huge methodological flaw in discovering past lives through hypnosis. In hypnotherapy, the receptivity of the patient to the suggestions received from the hypnotist is an essential element for its success. But when some real information from the client's past lives is expected, the hypnotist's suggestive capacity compromises the reliability of the information produced by the client. The hypnotist expects a confirmation of a personal belief in reincarnation. So he or she not only transmits suggestions for relaxation, but also the expectation that a past life will be found. In most modern cases, this expectation is explicitly stated to the client before the hypnotic regression. Here, for example, is what one master of hypnotic regression teaches to new practitioners to help them discover alleged past lives of their clients. At the time of your first meeting with the client, it is imperative to establish their goals and your objectives for a solid afterlife experience. The most effective sessions are those where your client knows in advance the step-by-step procedure you will use. This takes nothing away from the mystery and awe of the life between lives experience. I explained that our association will be a partnership where the two of us are going to take a journey together into the spirit world. As Ian Wilson points out in his book Mind Out of Time, the client of past life regression feels compelled to respond to the hypnotist's suggestions and produce a convincing scenario. This means that hypnotic regression does not investigate if real past lives exist, but is a method by which it is suggested to the clients that they certainly had past lives and that the time has come to tell their story. A strange aspect of past life regression, which should raise further doubts about its reliability, is that it can be used as a method for exploring not just past lives, but also future lives. Interestingly enough, these are not from the near future, that is verifiable by the next generation, but from the distant future, at least 100 years away. Helen Wambach, one of the enthusiasts of researching the future by means of hypnosis, obtained in the 1980s scenarios following a nuclear war, which was the great fear of those years, and of worlds similar to the popular Star Trek series. Another concern for the enthusiasts of hypnotic regression should be that the information retrieved from past lives is dependent on the existing historical knowledge at the time of the regression. Several such cases are discussed in Ian Wilson's book Reincarnation. One character from a former life presented himself as living during the reign of Pharaoh Ramesses III. Instead of mentioning the name used at that time for the pharaoh's capital, which according to more recent discoveries was Vasset, the name this Egyptian used was Thebes, given by Greeks much later. In addition, in ancient Egypt, the names of pharaohs were not accompanied by ordinal numbers. Ramesses III is a name given by Egyptologists as late as the 19th century. How could a person speaking from ancient Egypt adapt its testimony to the language and historical knowledge of today? Wambach mentions a case in which the recalled person claimed to live in 2083 BC. So how did she know then and there this kind of chronology? In some cases, although the information produced by clients is in line with known historical facts, subsequent discoveries contradict it. For instance, one person's former life was about a Viking invasion in North America in the 11th century AD. In this story, the Vikings wore hornet helmets. Although this is common knowledge to many of us, it has been discovered that Vikings never used such helmets in their raids, but only in religious rituals. Normally they used conical helmets. Strangely, the knowledge of the person subjected to hypnotic regression conditioned the message of the supposed person living 1,000 years ago. These facts suggest that the information from past lives depends heavily on those of the person subjected to the hypnotic regression, and thus cannot be trusted. Another problem associated with past life regression is that suggestions given under hypnosis stay in the patient's mind even after the therapy session is over. This is an important element when treating addictions, but when studying past lives, it is counterproductive. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist of the University of Virginia, whose study on former lives will be more important for the next episode, warns that there are real dangers associated with past life recall by hypnosis. I quote, In my experience, nearly all so-called previous personalities evoked through hypnotism are entirely imaginary and a result of the patient's eagerness to obey the hypnotist's suggestion. It is no secret that we are all highly suggestible under hypnosis. This kind of investigation can actually be dangerous. Some people have been terribly frightened by their supposed memories, and in other cases the previous personality evoked has refused to go away for a long time. So what could explain these cases apart from reincarnation? Are there alternative ways to explain what happens during past life recall? As we remember from the previous 2 episodes, what reincarnates is the self, the Atman, and its causal body. Nothing of what could preserve personal identity, as the body, memory, and character traits, can survive death, if we follow the Hindu view of human nature. But if memory does not make it to the next life, what do these people remember under hypnosis? The most probable explanation of the stories recollected under hypnosis seems to be cryptomnesia, which in the American Dictionary of Psychology is defined as, I quote, an implicit memory phenomenon in which people mistakenly believe that a current thought or idea is a product of their own creation, when in fact they have encountered it previously and then forgotten it. Since hypnosis can be used to revive long forgotten information of one's own experience, it can also be a way of retrieving information acquired from other people, read in books or seen in films, in which the client sees himself or herself as personally involved. The ability to differentiate between one's own experiences and those of others is lost under hypnosis, and thus it is wrongly assumed that the information produced under hypnosis belongs to a client's past life. The source of information can rather be found in the present life. In fact, if during hypnosis clients are asked to reveal the source of the data from past lives, they will easily do so by pointing to sources from the present life, a book, a film, or a conversation. This fact has been demonstrated by the Finnish psychiatrist Reima Kampman of the University of Oulu. If the person who recounted past lives is again hypnotized and is not asked to return to those past lives, but to indicate the source of information about the characters mentioned in an earlier session, he or she will indicate the source as a book, a film, or a conversation. In this way, each past life has been identified in sources that date from the present life. Kampman reached the conclusion, I quote, "The findings support the idea that the experiences of the present personality are reflected in the multiple personalities, both in the form of realistic details and as emotional experiences. The recall of a song is an outstanding example of how very detailed information can be stored in our mind, and how it can be retrieved in deep hypnosis without any idea of it whatsoever in the conscious mind." In fact, Kampman studied past lives as cases of induced multiple personality. I'll mention in the description his articles so you can read them yourself. Multiple personality is a psychiatric disorder which makes patients change into several distinct personalities over a period of time, as if playing successive roles in different plays. These personalities have different characters, behavioral patterns, and voices, and possibly the other sex from the real person. In his study, Kampman argues that only 7% of his subjects were able to enter a deep hypnotic trance and create multiple personalities under hypnosis. Here is how he explains the way these new personalities appear. The suggestion to go back to an earlier chronological time is extremely dissociative from the point of view of the present personality, because the ego then has to and must be able to create a new identity. This conflict situation is reinforced by the fact that under deep hypnosis, the majority of the ego energy of the subject is at the hypnotist's disposal, and consequently a hypnotic suggestion is equivalent to a very strong stress. He adds in another article, I quote again, "A marked emotional experience during the hypnotic regression provides no assurance that memories of a real previous life were recovered. The subjective experience of reliving a previous life may be impressive to the person having the experience, and yet the previous life may be a fantasy, like most of our dreams." In conclusion, the stories produced under hypnosis do not correspond to real past lives. All the information revealed under hypnosis comes from one's own mind and is acquired in this life. Although stories of past lives seem dramatic, they are convincing only for those who already believe in reincarnation and are not willing to consider the devastating flaws of this method of proving reincarnation. Therefore, do not let yourselves be deceived. Hypnosis does not prove reincarnation, so you have not lived previous lives and you have no other lives in this world. This life is enough for us to be saved. In the next episode, we assess another kind of past life recall experiences, which seem more convincing. Meanwhile, please subscribe and share this information. Thank you for watching and God bless you.